All right, I was saying. Okay, so we're gonna go into this letter that Jackson sent to his lawyer Faye. This is where he actually met Faye. He was introducing himself to Faye, pretty much telling him what he's about. He's about a revolution, and he knows he's been done wrong, and he doesn't deserve all of this, so he needs as much help as he can get. And Faye is pretty much understanding him. Um, and he really appreciated her sticking along with him, and she really appreciated how intelligent she is. And I guess this is the first woman that he actually trusted when it comes to like a political consciousness state. So he really appreciated her commitment to the job. And let me see. Let me see. Pretty much informing Faye about how much the system divides and rules. Let me see. It was on March 22nd, 1970. He was talking about a divide and conquering of the system. Oh no, right here. He said, "You see, every time a rat does get put away, the prison authorities always release a different reason for the attack. Never that he was an informer. Their purpose for always withholding the truth is that they don't want to discourage other potential rats, and the truth would aid the convict in the psychological war, con against cop. For it is their purpose to always keep us divided and fearful of trusting the next con. You are aware that it's always the goal of oppressive authority, those who govern without the consent of the governed, to keep their wars divided. They can maintain their control in no other way." So he was pretty much how he even sees that in the in the prison system, the way prisoners are acting, because they try to follow these directions, and it's like the way slavery was. Like, there are certain slaves that want every other slave to be respectable to the master, and it's the same way with prison. Is a divide and conquer tactic to keep people in power. And let me see, another one about divide and conquer. He says right here, in the well-ordered society, prisons will not exist as such. If a man is ill, he should be placed in a hospital, staffed by the very best of technicians. Men would never be separated from women. These places will be surfeited with equipment and meaningful programs, even if it meant diverting funds from another or even from all other sectors of the economy. It's socially self-destructive to create a monster and loose him upon the world. So, considering the defund the police strategy that's going on last summer, I think George Jackson would agree, because he feels like some institutions will be better funded than the police and actually contribute to actually healthy outcomes. And this is a long paragraph that I'm going to read. He's gonna be describing how Vietnam and all of that is tied into the way the American society works. He says here, the first presumption is mercy. It presumes the possible existence of mercy on the part of a breed whose heart is as cold as the snows. It presumes existence of a restraint mechanism that in other breeds and other animals precludes the harming of one's kind unless placed under the most extreme compulsions of self-preservation. But history shows no justification for so wild a presupposition. I refer you to Leopold II's Congo, the Indian Wars of the last century, the Union of South Africa, Sharpsville, the Philippines at the turn of the century. I refer you to Germany during the Great Depression and war years. I refer you to Vietnam. Just a cursory reading of history and just a glance about me now would show that I could expect more mercy from a pack of Bengal tigers. Any claims that purely nonviolent political agitation has served to force back the legions of capitalist expansion are false. The theory of nonviolence is a false ideal. The Hindus failed because of this moral aspect in their characters precluding any large-scale organized violence. The forms of slavery merely changed for them. Of what value is quasi-political control if the capitalists are allowed to hold on to the people's whole means of subsistence? And in the case of India and foreign capitalists, have any of the people's needs been met? Do they still have race riots? Do they still sleep in the streets? These people were portrayed by false leaders with false ideals. Compare India with China. They were both supposedly liberated at the same time. India may have had a year or more of what is loosely termed political self-determination. China's problems in the late 40s were 10 times more severe, but today there is no one hungry in China. For the first time, its population is united and organized under a government as decentralized and representative as a huge modern industrial-based society can be. China, land of the coolie, slave labor, open door policies, floor mat of the West, they're vying for the first place in every important economic sector today. Remember the 1839 Opium War, the Boxer Rebellion. A trial of combat with China today will be Russian roulette with a fully loaded .45 automatic self-destruction suicide. And he also said here, pure nonviolence as a political ideal then is absurd. Politics is violence. It may serve our purpose to claim nonviolence, but we must never delude ourselves into thinking that we can seize power from a position of weakness with half measures, polite programs, righteous indignation, loud entreaties. If this agitation that we like to term as nonviolent is to have any meaning at all, we must force the fascists to taste the bitterness of our wrath. Nonviolence must constantly demonstrate the effects of its implied opposites. So he's saying nonviolence, as history has been prescribed, has shown, barely works. So because like stuff like the Civil War, the World War II, Vietnam, the war in the Philippines, what else did he say? King Leopold's genocide of Africans in the Congo. Literally the Holocaust. It's like, where do we go from here for nonviolence? And he also says here, to seize power for the people and relegate fascism to the history books, the vanguard must change the basic patterns of thought. We are going to have to study the principles of people's movements. We are going to have to study the principles of people's movements. We are going to have to study them where they took place and interpret them to fit our situation here. We have yet to discover the meaning of people's war, people's army, the righteous people of the world who are struggling with a monster on the only terms that he can be fought must have many reservations concerning us, especially those of us who are black. What are the fierce and wonderful people of Vietnam thinking of us? Where's a real left wing? What has been done to us? What makes us fail to resist? The successes of China, Cuba, Vietnam, and parts of Africa cannot be attributed to any innate singular quality in the characters of their people. Men are social creatures, herd animals. We follow leaders. The success or failure of mass movements depends on their leadership and the method of their leaders. We must take our lessons from these people, reorganize our values, decide whether it is our personal desire to live long or to chance living right. I love that. Whether it is our personal desire to live long or to chance living right. People's war, class struggle, war of liberation means armed struggle. So that's organizing one-on-one, I would say. If you're an organizer, that probably would be your objective into going into whatever you're organizing about. And let me see, is that it for that letter? Yeah, that's it for that letter. And then he went into another capitalism rant. He's pretty much all about this. Oh my gosh, it's another long one. Bear with me. Okay. Ever since that time, our principal economy must be isolated and identified as capitalism. The slaver was and is the factory owner, the businessman of capitalist America, the man responsible for employment, wages, prices, control of the nation's institutions and culture. It was the capitalist infrastructure of Europe and the U.S. which was responsible for the rape of Africa and Asia. Capitalism murdered those 30 million in the Congo. Believe me, the European and Anglo-American capitalists would never have wasted the ball in powder were it not for the nonprofit principle. All the men who went into Africa and Asia, the fleas who climbed on that elephant's back with rape on their minds, richly deserve all that they are called. Every one of them deserves to die for their crimes. So do the ones who are still in Vietnam, Angola, Union of South Africa. But we must not allow the emotional aspects of these issues, the scum at the surface, to obstruct our view of the big picture, the whole rotten hunk. It was capitalism that armed the ships, free enterprise that launched them, private ownership of property that fed the troops. Imperialism took up where the slave trade left off. It wasn't until after the slave trade ended that America, England, France, and the Netherlands invaded and settled in on Afro-Asian soil in earnest. As the European Industrial Revolution took hold, new economic attractions replaced the older ones. Chattel slavery was replaced by neo-slavery. Capitalism, free enterprise, private ownership of public property armed and launched the ships and fed the troops. It should be clear that it was a profit motive that kept them there. It was the profit motive that built the tenement house and the city project. Profit and loss prevents repairs and maintenance. Free enterprise brought the monopolistic chain store into the neighborhood. The concept of private ownership of facilities that the people need to exist through the legions of hip shooting, brainless pigs down upon our heads, our homes, our streets. They're there to protect the entrepreneur, his chain store, and his property that you are renting his bank. If the entrepreneur decides that he no longer wants to sell you food, let's say because the Yankee dollar that we value so dearly has suddenly lost its last 30 cents of purchasing power, private ownership means that the only way many of the people will eat is to break the law. Fat Rat Daily has ordered all looters shot. And then he got into black capitalism and how he's literally going into why capitalism through the historical black lens never has benefited black people at all. So then he went into the Great Depression and how his father has lived with the trauma when he was going through life during the Great Depression. His father had to work so many jobs, so because of the way things were, so he barely got to see. He couldn't be the father that he could be. He couldn't be the healthy father that he could have been if it wasn't for all the jobs that he had to do. And then Jackson said here, the American fascists used 1,000 similar devices, delaying maneuvers to prevent the people from questioning the validity of the principles upon which capitalism is founded, to turn the people against themselves, people against people, people against other groups of people. Always they will promote competition while they cooperate, division, mistrust, a sense of isolation, the antipodes of love. The MO of the fascist arrangement is always to protect the capitalist class by destroying the consciousness, the trust, the unity of the lower class. And then he went into how that has affected his father and how the Great Depression is tied to Nazism and World War II in Germany. And then he said here about his father, he stayed with us, worked 16 hours a day, after which he would eat, bathe, and sleep, period. He never owned more than 2 pairs of shoes in his life, and in the time I was living with him, never more than 1 suit, never took a drink, never went to a nightclub, expressed no feelings about such things, and never once reminded any one of us, or so it seemed, never expected any notice of the fact that he was giving to us all of the life force and activity that the monster machine had left to him. The part that the machine sees, that death of the spirit visited upon him by a world that he never influenced, was mourned by us, and most certainly by me, but no one ever made a real effort to give him solace. How do you console a man who is unapproachable? And that's the unfortunateness of all of the that capitalism brings. People are worked to death and burned out, and it keeps families from being in tune and harmony with each other. So it was hard for him to have a relationship with his father then. And let me see, was that it for that letter? No, he says here, depression is an economic condition. It is part of the capitalist business cycle, a necessary concomitant of capitalism. Its colonies, secondary markets, will always be depressed areas because the steadily decreasing labor force, decreasing and growing more skilled under the advances of automation, casts the unskilled colonial subject into economic roles that preclude economic mobility. Learning the new skills, even if we were allowed, wouldn't help. It wouldn't help the masses even if they learned them. It wouldn't help because there is a fixed ceiling on the labor force. This ceiling gets lower with every advance in the arts of production. Learning the newer skills would merely put us into competition with established labor that we could not win, one that we don't want. There are absolutely no vacuums for us to fill in the business world. We don't want to capitalize on people anyway. Capitalism is the enemy. It must be destroyed. There is no other recourse. The system is not workable in view of the modern industrial city-based society. Men are born disenfranchised. The contract between ruler and ruled perpetuates this disenfranchisement. And like I say, we literally live in a society where people are born into poverty, born into wealth, or born into whatever the petite bourgeois or lumpen proletariat ways of life. And then he also says here, evolution of the huge modern city-based society has made our dependence upon government complete. Individually, we cannot feed ourselves and our children. We cannot by ourselves train and educate them at home. We cannot organize our own work inside the city structure by ourselves. Consequently, we must allow men to specialize in coordinating these activities. We pay them, honor them, and surrender control of certain aspects of our lives to them so that they will in return take each new, helpless entry into the social group and work on him until he is no longer helpless, until he can start to support himself and make his contribution to the continuity of the society. And that goes into like, it literally takes a village to raise a child. But even if you're a child, when you're an adult, you still need other people to help you with your survival. You can't depend on yourself the entire time. Like, you need some help in order to survive. And then, let me see. Is that it for that letter? Yep, that was it for that letter. And he also critiqued how black communities are victim to this, like the leader-follower complex, in which predatory men learn of the natural occurrence of leadership in all of the social animals, that each group will by nature produce a leader, and to these natural leaders fall the responsibility for coordination of the group's activity, organizing them for survival. The buffalo hunter knew that if he could isolate and identify the leader of the herd and kill him first, the rest of the herd will be helpless, at his mercy, to be killed off as he saw fit. So that goes into how he feels like people like Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Medgar Evers, and all those prominent leaders during the civil rights movement, they've been assassinated because they know that people inspire them to go against the status quo, so that the government or some people in the community or group knew that assassinating them would give them like an opportunity for despair and not actually go and know what the government is all about and stuff. Like, they're not afraid to be merciless in how they feel about killing a leader. And I also think that goes into Ella Baker, why she feels like participatory democracy is a helpful model, because it's like everyone can lead themselves. We don't need a leader. We can lead ourselves. We know what we want, and we need to encourage discussion and interaction with each other so we can get to a society that suits all of us and all our needs, and make all our needs met. And then I think that was all the letters that I wanted to get into that goes into Faye. Oh no, there's another one. Yeah, she says here, the man who owns the factory or shop or business runs your life. You are dependent on this owner. He organizes your work, the work upon which your whole life source and style depends. He indirectly determines your whole day and organizing you for work. If you don't make any more in wages than you need to live, you are a neo-slave. So he was able to explain how we still live in a slave economy. It just looks different than how it was before the Civil War. And he also says here, the pig is protecting the right of a few private individuals to own public property. The pig is merely the gun, the tool, a mentally inanimate utensil. I would use a different terminology because that could be ableist. It is necessary to destroy the gun, but destroying the gun and sparing the hand that holds it will forever relegate us to a defensive action. Hold our revolution in the doldrums, ultimately defeat us. And let me see. I didn't realize I didn't realize I highlighted a lot here. Yeah, he also says here the cultural links to the established capitalist society have been a lot closer than we like to admit. In the area of culture, I'm using this word in a narrow sense out of necessity. We are bonded to the fascist government society by chains that have strangled our intellect, scrambled our wits, and sent us stumbling backward in a wild, disorganized retreat from reality. We don't want their culture. We don't want a piece of that pie. It's rotten, putrid, repulsive to all the senses. Why are we rushing to board a sinking ship? When we join hands with the established fascist scum in any way, it gives the people of the world, the righteous people of the Congo, Tanzania, Sudan, of Cuba, China, Vietnam, etc., the legitimate right to hate us too. So he's pretty much going into it's just so much evil in the United States. There's no way we can participate in the system, whether it's working for the government, whether it's literally existing and paying taxes. Like, it's just so much evil. Like, why are we even involved in it at all? But sometimes we're just in there because we have no choice. Literally, obviously, because a lot of African ancestors from African Americans where they were kidnapped into slavery. But it's like, why are we even still involved at this point? And then he told Faye how he was how the American system works. He was talking about capitalism, the police, imperialism, the American education system, and how there's a need for internationalism. And an example was this with an argument with a teacher in the prison, and how the teacher was going with him back and forth about American exceptionalism and political economy. And the teacher challenged Jackson about the motivations for hard American understanding of if you work hard, you'll succeed. And the teacher says, well, in our factory setups, we have quotas to meet and foremen and efficiency experts to see that they are met. And Jackson says here, you did say quotas. That sounds like something from one of Fidel's public addresses, sugar quotas. The difference, of course, being that Fidel is depending on a cooperation that springs from a sense of participation, and perhaps the knowledge that the volume and quality of production determines their general well-being, rather than the personal fortunes of an owner or a small group of owners. So that's what's wrong with the American labor system. Like, it focuses on the profits of those that owns the means of productions rather than the well-being and the security of the workers. And if I can go through a current event right now, if y'all look at Nabisco, the Nabisco company, that's the company that makes chips and cookies. There's literally like a labor strike going on about the Nabisco company because of wages and labor shortages and more exploitation. So workers are being paid less when they're working more. So there's a strike going on about that right now. And that's what Jackson's saying that is so relevant today. And here, I think that's it with that letter. Yep, that's it with that letter. And then he made a letter for this woman named Z. I'm not sure the full name of this woman, but apparently it's someone that George Jackson fell in love with. He wrote a lot of love letters to her, which was very sweet. One statement stuck out to me about one of the love letters about how he chooses to love. He says here, I'll love you till the wings fly off, at least, perhaps beyond. My love could burn you, however. It runs hot and I have nearly half a millennium stored up. Mine is a perfect love, soft to the touch, but so hot, hard, and dense as its center that its weight will soon offset this planet. So it's like, even though he's in prison, like, there's someone that gives him a reason to live. So that's literally what I appreciated about the love letters. And then he wrote another letter to this woman named Joan, who was a member of the Soledad Defense Committee. So he expressed his love to her, and I can't even understand if it's like genuine love, like romantic love, or like it sounds, the one to Z sounds like a romantic love, but letters I would say to like Joan and to Angela Davis, I just think is like more of a solidarity type of love. But it goes into like the how we desire intimacy and from other people, and just seeing them doing things that they're doing. And I think that's what he was doing when he was expressing appreciation and love to Joan and Angela Davis. And to Angela Davis, he was pretty much showing his appreciation for the work that she's done with the Communist Party, and warning her about the extremes of oppression because they can literally kill you. And I think when Angela Davis was incarcerated, there were talks of the gas chamber and the death penalty. So he was warning her about the lengths that white supremacy and capitalism goes. And he's talking about death row victims. Some people that were on a lot of people that are in death row were falsely accused, and were in death row for no reason. Um, and that was pretty much the gist of that letter. And he pretty much talked about how he thinks about Angela all the time. And it's funny now because Angela Davis right now is a lesbian. So it's but this is before she came out. So I think this was more of a solidarity communal type of love that he was trying to express. But some of it was like there were remnants that were showing that it was probably romantic in some places. And here he wrote to Joan, ideals and ideas grow and become more definite when one attempts to explain them to others who will try to understand. And he really appreciated um, Joan being a person who can affirm his consciousness and in his politics, and someone he can trust and care for. And Angela Davis too. And then I think that was it for that part. It was another letter to Angela Davis and another letter to Joan. Another letter to Angela Davis, another letter to Joan. So he was writing to them a lot lately in the later years. And then let me see. It was June 17th, 1970, and this one was to Joan. He was pretty much talking about the greed and hoarding that created Western culture. He said, men hoard against want, need, don't they? Aren't they taught that tomorrow holds terror? Pile up a surplus against this terror. Be greedy and possessive if you want to succeed in this insecure world. Nuts hidden away for tomorrow's winter. Change the environment. Educate the man. He'll change. The people store will work as long as people know that it will be there and have an abundance, the things they need and want, really want. When they are positive that the common effort has and will always produce an abundance, they won't bother to take home more than they need. Water is free. Do people drink more than they need? There is a reason for the ugliness of Western culture. Many reasons, I would say, but the fact that it was founded and tied into greed, the greed to store so much and work and fight so hard for something to store, stands out from the other reasons. Pretty much talking about how it's absurd how this system is a system that privatizes things that you need for survival, like water, food, healthcare, education, and housing and other things. It's just I appreciate that this is something that's written in the 70s, and other people are still believe that this is something that makes sense. And he also says here, and this is a letter to I guess his sister G. She says, to be denied or rejected means less to this man, but never nothing. And if he is still healthy of mind, he knows he can't be practical. He can't afford practicality. His have nothing status, the absence of the all important controls, predisposes predisposes him to impracticality. He can never relax. He is or becomes a desperate man, and desperate men do desperate things, take desperate positions. When revolution comes, he is the first to join it. If it doesn't come, he makes it. But the significant feature of the desperate man reveals itself when he meets other desperate men, direct or vicariously, and he experiences his first kindness, someone to strain with him, to strain to see him as he strains to see himself, someone to understand, someone to accept the regard, the love that desperation forces into hiding. And I think this is like a retrospective analysis because I think when he realizes when he was a youth and he went into all this crime, he realized that he was in a mode of desperation. He just wanted to gain something out of this system because the system gives him nothing. And whether it's through robbery, whether it's through violence, that's the system enables for people to live like that. And we need to realize we need a radical transformation of this system because no one should live the life that George Jackson lived. And yeah, like exploitation leads to desperation, and capitalism leads to poverty, and poverty can lead to violence. And then this is the last letter. This was dated August 9th, 1970. And this was 2 days after Jonathan Jackson's murder. So he pretty much, this was a letter to Joan, and it was pretty much a remembrance of Jonathan and how, even though he was 17, he got to live life with his dignity. And he did all that because he loves his brother. He did that thing to his courthouse because he wants his brother to stop suffering. So, and he really has a lot of respect to his brother. And yeah, he says, I can't go any further. It will be just a love story about the baddest brother this world has had the privilege to meet, and it's just not popular or safe to say I love him. So that was the last letter. And that's it, y'all. Yeah, I know this is a long video. I probably could have made it into parts, but it's just this story. It's just I can't give you like I can't give you focus on a certain section of George Jackson's life because the way that the book is structured is just something is something different, and it's always a process to go through. And it's a tragedy that he lived the life the way that he had to deal with. And yeah, and the last letter was dated August 9th, 1970. And then August 21st, 1971 was when George Jackson was murdered in the prison escape. So it was a year after that letter was when George Jackson died. So that makes 50 years after George Jackson was murdered. So this is the 50th commemoration of his death. August 21st of 2021. Yeah, 1971 to 2021. That's 50 years. So yeah. So would I recommend this book? I recommend this book if you really want to get into like how important Black August is. Because I wanted to read Blood in My Eye by George Jackson. I need to buy that book too. But this goes into like the day-to-day life of a prisoner. So it's literally interesting. It's Ashada Shakur, she dealt into some of her prison life, but she didn't die when she was in prison. So it's through the lens of someone who wrote and died and had an adult life taken away from him while he was incarcerated. So that's an interesting perspective to me. So thank you, y'all, for staying with me for this book. I'm still thinking about the next book that I want to read and how soon I'm going to actually read and put a video out for it. But yeah, make sure y'all follow my reading list page at Raisin Souls and my personal Instagram at Intellectualbert. It'll be on the description box below. And I hope everyone takes care, and happy final days of Black August. And take care. See ya.